I used to be the first person every client demanded to see. Yet that Monday morning, I was called into HR and learned my fate from a printout. No thank you. No one looked me in the eye. They thought I'd retreat in silence. They were wrong. My name is Madeline Carter, and for 16 years, I was the backbone of Westbridge Strategy Group. At 41, I wasn't just another account director, I was the account director. The one who'd built relationships with 18 major clients from scratch when this place was nothing more than a startup operating out of a converted warehouse in downtown Arden Falls. I remember those early days, working until midnight on proposals, driving through Colorado snowstorms to meet clients face-to-face because video calls weren't personal enough. I was 25 then, hungry and loyal. The founder, old man Westbridge himself, used to say I had the gift, the ability to read a room, to know exactly what a client needed before they asked. When he retired 5 years ago, I thought my position was secure. I'd earned it. Then Tyler Greaves happened, fresh from his MBA, all of 33 years old with his Tesla and his disruptive vision. Tyler swept in as our new CEO 6 months ago. His first all-hands meeting was about pivoting to match market dynamics and optimizing our talent portfolio. I should have seen the writing on the wall when he started bringing in consultants half my age, kids who talked about growth hacking, but couldn't tell you the difference between customer retention and customer acquisition if their stock options depended on it. The meeting that ended everything was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Monday. Monica from HR couldn't meet my eyes as she slid the folder across the table. "Restructuring," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your position is being eliminated." I almost laughed. My position? The position I'd created, nurtured, and expanded? The role that generated 40% of the company's revenue. "Ashley Rowe will be taking over your accounts," Monica continued, still staring at her laptop screen. "She's very eager to learn from the transition." Ashley Rowe, 27 years old. Previous experience, social media coordinator at a fashion startup that folded after 8 months. This was who they chose to manage relationships I'd spent over a decade building. "Effective immediately?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "We'll need your laptop and keycard before you leave. Security will escort you to collect your personal items." 16 years. And I was given a banker's box and 20 minutes. As I packed my desk, the photos from client celebrations, the handwritten thank you notes, the industry awards with my name engraved in silver. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, exactly. Something colder, more calculated. They thought I was expendable, a line item to be optimized away. They assumed those 18 clients belonged to Westbridge, not to the woman who knew their kids' names, their coffee orders, their biggest fears about market volatility. As security walked me through the lobby I'd entered thousands of times, past the reception desk where I'd greeted every new employee for over a decade. I didn't make a scene. I smiled, even waved goodbye to a few stunned colleagues. Because I knew something Tyler Greaves didn't. Relationships aren't company property. And he'd just made the most expensive mistake of his career. The first thing I did when I got home wasn't cry or rage or update my LinkedIn status. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my personal laptop. There it was, my real treasure. A Notion database I'd been building for 16 years. Not company property. Not covered by any NDA. Just my memory. Meticulously organized. Every client had their own page. Richard Brennan at Apex Manufacturing, divorced, 2 kids in college. Passionate about sustainable supply chains, always anxious before board meetings. Sarah Liu at Denver Tech Solutions, early riser. Responds best to emails sent before 7 a.m. Lost her mother to cancer last year. Appreciates when you remember to ask about her golden retriever. Max. David Thompson at Mountain State Financial, hates corporate jargon, loves baseball metaphors, secretly considering early retirement, but worried about his legacy. These weren't trade secrets or proprietary information. They were relationships. Human connections I'd cultivated over thousands of hours, hundreds of coffee meetings, countless after-hours calls when deals were falling apart and someone needed to hear, We'll figure this out together. I scrolled through my personal phone. Text threads going back years. Madeline, thanks for talking me through that merger anxiety. You saved our bacon again. My daughter got into Colorado State. Remember you wrote her that recommendation letter? Not a single message went through Westbridge servers. They were sent to my personal number, the one I'd freely given because I understood something Tyler Greaves never would. Business is personal. My LinkedIn inbox held another goldmine. Connection requests I'd accepted. Relationships I'd maintained even when it didn't directly benefit Westbridge. The CEO of a startup who'd pitched us 3 years ago and been rejected, I'd stayed in touch, offering free advice when she needed it. The marketing director who'd left one of our client companies, I'd helped her find her next role. The procurement manager who'd been laid off during COVID, I'd reviewed his resume on my own time. None of this violated any agreement I'd signed. How could it? These were human relationships, built on trust and mutual respect. You can't copyright a birthday reminder. You can't trademark knowing that someone prefers phone calls to emails because they're dyslexic, or that they'll always take a meeting if you suggest their favorite Vietnamese restaurant on Federal Boulevard. I pulled up my calendar. Over the years, I'd maintained regular coffee meetings, lunches, even virtual happy hours during the pandemic. Always from my personal email. Always positioned as friendship, not business, because that's what they were. When you work with someone for a decade, when you celebrate their wins and commiserate over their losses, when you know their spouse's name and their kids' college plans, it stops being just business. The non-compete clause in my separation agreement was laughably narrow, standard Colorado law. I couldn't solicit Westbridge employees for 12 months or share proprietary processes. But clients? The agreement was silent. Tyler's lawyers had probably assumed those relationships were locked down by contracts and inertia. They'd never considered that those contracts were with Westbridge, not with me. And contracts can be ended. I thought about Ashley Rowe, probably sitting in my old office right now, staring at spreadsheets of contact information without any context. She'd have their email addresses, their phone numbers, their contract terms. But would she know that Richard Brennan's ex-wife had just been diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer? And he was privately terrified his daughter had inherited the genetic predisposition? Would she remember that Sarah Lou's fiscal year ended in October, not December, because of a merger 3 years ago? Would she understand why David Thompson would never, ever take a meeting on March 15th, the anniversary of his son's death in Afghanistan? Of course not. Because that knowledge lived in my head, in my personal notes, in the trust I'd earned one conversation at a time. I opened a new document and started typing, not a plan for revenge or sabotage. Just a simple framework for staying in touch with old friends. A birthday here, a congratulations on a company milestone there. Articles I'd found that might interest them, sent from my personal email with a note. Saw this and thought of you. I wasn't going to violate any legal agreement. I wasn't going to share trade secrets or steal proprietary information. I was simply going to continue being what I'd always been, a trusted advisor who genuinely cared about the people she worked with. If those people decided they'd rather work with someone who knew their history, their preferences, their fears and aspirations, well, that would be their choice, wouldn't it? Tyler Greaves thought he was cutting costs by eliminating an overpriced employee. What he'd actually done was cut the invisible threads that held his company's most valuable relationships together. And I held the other end of every single thread. 3 weeks. That's all it took for the cracks to show. I wasn't actively monitoring the situation. That would have been petty. But when you maintain genuine friendships with people across an industry, news travels. Sarah Lou mentioned it first during our regular Tuesday coffee chat at the Brown Palace Hotel. Your replacement called me Susan 3 times during our quarterly review, she said, shaking her head. Then she sent me a proposal template that was clearly recycled from another client, still had their company name in the footer. I stirred my cappuccino carefully. I'm sorry to hear that. Transitions can be challenging. Challenging. Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. Madeline, she scheduled a meeting during Chinese New Year. When I explained I'd be out of the country visiting family, She asked if I could just dial in from Beijing for a quick sync. Similar stories trickled in over the following days. Richard Brennan texted me a screenshot of an email from Ashley that began with, "Dear Mr. Brennan, after 16 years of first-name basis interactions." David Thompson called, frustrated. After Ashley had tried to optimize their engagement model by replacing quarterly face-to-face meetings with monthly form-based check-ins, she sent me a SurveyMonkey link, David said, disbelief clear in his voice. 16 questions about customer satisfaction metrics. Question 12 asked me to rate my synergy with Westbridge's value proposition on a scale of 1 to 10. But the real insight came from my former colleague Janet, who still worked in accounting. We met for lunch at our old spot, a family-owned Mexican restaurant where the owner knew our orders by heart. "It's a disaster," Janet said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one from the office was nearby. Ashley's trying to implement what she calls a scalable relationship matrix. She's color-coding clients based on revenue and putting them into automated email sequences. Automated? I kept my voice neutral. She bought some CRM software with Tyler's approval, $50,000. She's inputting all the client data. But Janet paused, choosing her words carefully. She doesn't understand the context. She marked Mountain State Financial as low touch because they only meet quarterly. She doesn't know those quarterly meetings are 3-day strategic sessions that basically set their entire year's direction. Janet pulled out her phone, showing me a photo she'd snapped of Ashley's whiteboard. Client names were arranged in quadrants: grow, maintain, optimize, and sunset. My stomach turned when I saw 3 of my oldest relationships in the sunset category. Clients whose contracts were smaller but who referred massive amounts of business our way. She's also standardizing everything, Janet continued. Same proposal templates, same meeting agendas, same follow-up schedules for everyone. She told Tyler it would improve efficiency by 30%. I thought about Richard Brennan, who needed detailed technical specifications and hated marketing fluff. About Sarah Liu, who preferred visual presentations with minimal text. About David Thompson, who wanted everything in plain English with military precision. One size fits all? It was like trying to replace a master chef with a microwave. "How's Tyler taking it?" I asked. Janet's expression darkened. "He's thrilled. Keeps talking about how Ashley's bringing fresh perspectives and digital transformation. He actually used the phrase paradigm shift in the all-hands meeting yesterday." The irony wasn't lost on me. Tyler had hired Ashley because she was young, cheap, and spoke his language of metrics and optimization. But relationships aren't Excel spreadsheets. You can't growth hack trust. You can't A/B test your way into being someone a client calls when their world is falling apart. The worst part? Janet leaned closer. Ashley asked it to pull all the email histories from your old account. She's trying to mine them for conversation patterns to feed into some AI chatbot she wants to implement. She actually said, and I quote, "We need to productize Madeline's institutional knowledge." I nearly choked on my enchilada. Productize my institutional knowledge, as if 16 years of human connection could be reduced to an algorithm? That night, I reviewed my notes on each client Ashley had categorized. The 3 in Sunset were particularly telling. Yes, their individual contracts were smaller, but Ashley hadn't bothered to research their networks. The CEO of one had just been elected president of the Colorado Business Alliance. Another sat on the boards of 4 companies we'd been trying to reach for years. The third was married to the procurement director of a Fortune 500 company. But in Ashley's world, they were just numbers on a spreadsheet, dragging down the average contract value. She was optimizing for metrics that looked good in a PowerPoint presentation, not for the intricate web of relationships that actually drove business growth. I made another note in my personal files and poured myself a glass of wine. I didn't need to do anything. Ashley was doing it all by herself. The first call came on a Thursday evening. I was making dinner, listening to jazz and enjoying the quiet of my townhouse. When my personal phone rang, Richard Brennan. Madeline. His voice carried a weight I recognized, the tone he used when facing difficult decisions. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I know you're taking some time off." Not at all, Richard. It's always good to hear from you. I turned down the stove, giving him my full attention. How's Emma doing at CU Boulder? There was a pause. She made Dean's List again, still planning on law school. Another pause. Madeline, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Are you planning to stay in Colorado? I chose my words carefully. I'm not going anywhere, Richard. This is home. Good. That's good. I could hear him gathering his thoughts. Look, I got a call from your replacement today. She wants to streamline our service package and move us to quarterly reports instead of monthly check-ins. She said it would be more efficient. I stayed silent, letting him talk. Efficient, he repeated, and I could picture him shaking his head. You know what's happening next month, right? Your board's voting on the Sentinel acquisition. The date had been circled in my mental calendar for months. Exactly. The biggest decision in our company's history, and she wants to go to quarterly reports. His frustration was palpable. She didn't even know about the acquisition until I mentioned it. Then she asked if I could send her a brief overview so she could get up to speed. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, Richard. Are you, though? There was a knowing tone in his voice. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Westbridge just handed you the best advertising campaign you could ask for. I'm not sure what you mean. Come on, Madeline. We've known each other too long for games. You're going independent, aren't you? I walked to my window, looking out at the Denver skyline. I'm exploring my options. Well, explore faster. I've got a board meeting in 2 weeks, and I need someone who actually understands what's at stake. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, thinking. I hadn't actively solicited anything. Richard had called me, but I knew this was a moment of decision. I could politely decline, refer him back to Westbridge, maintain the high road, or I could acknowledge what we both knew, that some relationships transcend corporate structures. The next morning, I sent a simple text to my lawyer. I need to understand exactly what I can and cannot do under Colorado law regarding client relationships. His response was illuminating. Colorado had some of the most employee-friendly laws in the country. Non-competes were nearly unenforceable, especially for client relationships I'd maintained personally. As long as I didn't use proprietary information or actively interfere with existing contracts, I was free to practice my profession. Over the next few days, more calls came. Sarah Lou wanted to know if I'd consider having coffee to discuss some challenges she was facing. David Thompson asked if I might be available for informal advice about his succession planning. 3 other clients reached out with variations of the same theme. They missed working with someone who understood their business. I didn't make a single outbound call. I didn't send a single solicitation. I simply responded to people who reached out, offering to meet for coffee, to listen, to provide the kind of thoughtful, contextual advice they'd grown accustomed to over the years. But I did make one proactive move. I updated my LinkedIn profile. Nothing dramatic, just changed my status from account director at Westbridge Strategy Group to strategic advisor, building lasting business relationships. I added a simple note. After 16 wonderful years at Westbridge, I'm excited to explore new opportunities to serve the Colorado business community. Within hours, my inbox exploded. Former colleagues, industry contacts, and yes, clients. All reaching out with congratulations, questions, and opportunities. Each message was personal, specific, referencing shared memories and past collaborations. Tyler Greaves must have seen it too, because Monday morning brought a terse email from Westbridge's legal department, reminding me of my ongoing obligations under my separation agreement. I forwarded it to my lawyer, who responded with beautiful simplicity. You've done nothing wrong. Save all communications. Continue as you were. That evening, as I prepared for my coffee meeting with Sarah Lou the next day, I pulled up her file in my personal database, not to mine it for advantage, but to remind myself of the human being I'd be sitting across from. A leader struggling with work-life balance, worried about her aging parents, proud of her company's growth but anxious about maintaining its culture. Ashley Rowe had her automated emails and efficiency metrics. I had something no software could replicate. I gave a damn. The text came from Janet at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Emergency board meeting tomorrow. Tyler's losing his mind. Thought you should know. I was reviewing contracts with my lawyer. 3 clients had formally terminated their relationships with Westbridge that afternoon, citing strategic realignment of vendor partnerships. Corporate speak for, we're following the person who actually knows our business. By Friday, the dominoes were falling faster than even I had anticipated. 18 clients, 10 days, each departure perfectly legal, completely above board. They'd simply exercised standard 30-day termination clauses that I'd personally negotiated years ago, back when Westbridge believed in partnership over punishment. The financial impact was staggering. Richard Brennan's Apex Manufacturing alone represented $200,000 in annual recurring revenue. Sarah Lou's Denver Tech Solutions, another $150,000. David Thompson at Mountain State Financial, $125,000. The smaller accounts Ashley had marked for sunset added another $275,000 combined. Total damage, $750,000 in ARR. Gone. But it wasn't just about the numbers. These clients were interconnected, part of Colorado's tight-knit business community. When Richard Brennan mentioned at the Colorado Business Alliance that he'd moved to a more personalized advisory relationship, others paid attention. When Sarah Lou casually shared at a Women in Tech luncheon that she was working with Madeline Carter directly now, heads turned. Janet called me Thursday night, whispering from a conference room. It's chaos, she said. Tyler called an all-hands at 4 p.m., accused people of sabotage, said there must be a mole feeding you information. HR had to step in when he started threatening to check everyone's personal phones. I haven't spoken to anyone at Westbridge except you, I said carefully. And we're friends having dinner, not discussing company business. I know, but he's paranoid. Ashley's in tears. She tried to save the Mountain State account by offering a 40% discount. David Thompson apparently told her that price was never the issue, and hung up. I winced. David hated being patronized, and a panic discount would have felt like an insult to everything we'd built together. The board's asking questions, Janet continued. How did we lose 40% of revenue in 2 weeks? Why weren't these relationships protected? Someone pointed out that you'd recommended adding stronger retention clauses to contracts 3 years ago. But Tyler had rejected it as unnecessarily restrictive. The irony was perfect. I'd pushed for those clauses not to trap clients, but to ensure both parties were invested in long-term success. Tyler had seen them as barriers to agile business development. Now his agility was biting back. Oh, and the best part? Janet's voice carried dark amusement. Ashley submitted her analysis of what went wrong. She blamed it on legacy client dependencies and recommended implementing an anti-keyman risk protocol going forward. 1. What does that even mean? She wants to rotate account managers every 18 months so no one builds deep relationships. She actually wrote, I saw the memo, that personal connections create dangerous single points of failure. I stared at my phone in disbelief. The solution to losing clients because of impersonal service was to make service even more impersonal. The next morning, I received a certified letter from Westbridge's lawyers. They were investigating potential violations of confidentiality agreements and demanded I cease all contact with former Westbridge clients immediately. My lawyer laughed when I showed it to him. They're fishing. If they had anything concrete, they'd file for an injunction, not send threatening letters. Keep every document. This is intimidation, not litigation. But the letter revealed something crucial. They were scared. A 40% revenue drop would trigger loan covenants, spook investors, and possibly violate terms with their private equity partners. Tyler wasn't just facing a bad quarter, he was facing an existential crisis. That afternoon, I formally incorporated Carter Insight Studio, LLC, simple name, clear purpose. My website went live that evening, clean, professional, with testimonials from business leaders I'd worked with over the years. Not current Westbridge clients, Of course. But CEOs I'd helped before they were CEOs. Entrepreneurs whose first deals I'd shepherded, industry veterans who remembered when relationships mattered more than metrics. The phone started ringing immediately. Not just the 18 who'd already left Westbridge, but others. Companies that had never been Westbridge clients but had heard about my approach. Startups looking for guidance. Established firms seeking someone who understood that business was still, fundamentally, about people trusting people. By Sunday night, I'd signed retainer agreements with 6 clients and had meetings scheduled with 12 more. My rate was higher than what Westbridge had charged. Turns out, people will pay premium prices for premium relationships. As I prepared for Monday's meetings, I thought about Tyler Greaves, probably strategizing damage control with consultants who'd never met a single one of his lost clients. About Ashley Rowe, drowning in spreadsheets that couldn't explain why personal connections weren't just a nice to have, but the entire foundation of the business. They'd learn, eventually. Or they wouldn't. And Westbridge would join the long list of companies that forgot that efficiency without humanity is just a very organized way to fail. 6 months later, I stood in my new office, a converted Victorian house in Denver's Capitol Hill neighborhood, complete with exposed brick walls and original hardwood floors. The contrast to Westbridge's sterile corporate cube farm couldn't have been more deliberate. This was a space where clients felt like guests, not metrics. Carter Insight Studio had grown faster than I dared imagine. 5 founding clients had become 12. Then, 20. I'd hired 2 senior advisors, both refugees from firms that had optimized away their humanity, and a brilliant operations manager who understood that personal service and professional systems weren't mutually exclusive. The local business journal had run a feature. The Relationship Renaissance, How Madeline Carter Built a Boutique Consultancy on Trust. The reporter had asked about my overnight success. I'd smiled and told her it had taken 16 years and 1 very educational termination. The same week, the article ran. My phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in months. Tyler Greaves. Madeline. His voice carried none of its usual confident edge. I was hoping we could meet to discuss potential synergies. I leaned back in my leather chair, watching snowfall on the Denver skyline. I appreciate you reaching out, Tyler. But I'm not sure what synergies we could explore. We seem to have very different approaches to business. Look. His tone shifted, attempting casual. We both know what happened wasn't optimal. But Westbridge has resources you don't. Infrastructure, systems. We could create a strategic partnership. You could maintain your boutique brand while leveraging our scale. Translation: we're hemorrhaging clients and need you back. But my ego won't let me admit it directly. That's a generous offer, I said carefully. But I'm quite happy with our current scale. We're able to provide the personalized attention our clients value. Madeline, be realistic. You can't sustain this growth without proper backing. What happens when you need to scale? When enterprise clients want guarantees only a larger firm can provide. I smiled, thinking of the Fortune 500 company I'd signed the previous week, David Thompson's brother-in-law's firm. As it happened, they'd chosen us specifically because we weren't Westbridge. I appreciate your concern for my business, Tyler. Is there anything else? There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was harder. You know, what you did was unethical. Those were our clients. No, I said quietly. They were never your clients. They were people who trusted me with their business. Westbridge was just the middleman. We could have worked this out. You didn't have to burn it all down. I didn't burn anything, Tyler. I just stopped holding it up. He hung up without another word. Later that afternoon, Janet stopped by with coffee and gossip. She'd left Westbridge 2 months earlier, taking a CFO role with a startup. You heard about Ashley? She asked, settling into one of my client chairs. I shook my head. Lasted 8 months, moved to a digital marketing specialist role at some tech company. Her LinkedIn says she's excited to focus on scalable growth strategies. Janet's eye roll was audible. Translation: She got tired of clients expecting her to actually know their names. And Westbridge? Merged with Morrison Partners last month. Tyler's still CEO, technically, but he reports to their board now. Word is they're restructuring the client engagement model, again. I thought about the 18 clients who'd started this exodus. All still with me, plus dozens more. Richard Brennan had referred 3 colleagues. Sarah Liu had introduced me to her entire entrepreneurs group. David Thompson had become not just a client, but a strategic advisor, helping me navigate growth while maintaining the personal touch that defined us. The funny thing, Janet continued, is that Tyler still doesn't get it. The merger announcement talked about leveraging synergies and optimizing portfolio performance. Not one mention of relationships or trust or actually giving a damn about client success. That evening, I hosted our monthly client appreciation dinner. Nothing fancy, just good food, good wine, and good conversation at a local restaurant. No PowerPoints, no pitches, just people who'd become friends gathering to share stories and support each other's success. Richard Brennan raised a glass during dessert. To Madeline, he said, who reminded us that business is personal. And to Westbridge, who reminded us what happens when you forget that. The laughter was warm, genuine, tinged with just enough schadenfreude to be satisfying. As I drove home through the quiet Denver streets, I thought about Tyler's accusation. Unethical? Perhaps, in his worldview where relationships were corporate assets and people were resources to be optimized. But in my world, the real world, where business thrived on trust and mutual respect, I'd simply honored the connections I'd spent 16 years building. I hadn't stolen anything. I just refused to leave behind what was already mine. The snow continued falling, blanketing the city in fresh white. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new relationships to nurture. And Tyler Greaves would still be trying to optimize his way out of the hole he'd dug himself. 1 year later, I received an unexpected email. A former Westbridge colleague had sent me a screenshot from LinkedIn. Westbridge Strategy Group announces closure after failed restructuring. The accompanying press release was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak, citing market headwinds and strategic realignment of capital resources. Not a word about losing 70% of their client base in 18 months. I felt no satisfaction reading it, maybe a quiet vindication, but mostly sadness for the good people who'd lost their jobs because leadership confused efficiency with effectiveness, metrics with meaning. That same week, we celebrated Carter Insight Studios' first anniversary. We'd grown to 12 team members, each chosen for their ability to see clients as humans first, accounts second. Our office had expanded to the second floor of the Victorian, and we'd just signed a lease for a satellite space in Boulder. During our team meeting, our newest advisor, a veteran who'd spent 20 years at McKinsey before burning out on transformational optimization initiatives, asked the question everyone eventually asked, how did you know they'd follow you? I thought about it, pouring coffee from the machine I'd bought specifically because 3 clients had mentioned preferring dark roast. I didn't, I admitted. I just knew that if you treat people like spreadsheet cells long enough, they'll remember what it felt like to be treated like humans. And when someone offers them that again, I shrugged. The choice makes itself. My phone buzzed. Sarah Liu, texting from Shanghai where she was closing a major partnership deal. Presentation went perfectly. Used your suggestion about leading with the family business angle. They loved it. Dinner when I'm back. This was the difference. Ashley Rowe would have scheduled a debrief call and filled out a client interaction log. I'd simply be waiting at Sarah's favorite restaurant when she landed, ready to celebrate her success and plan the next move over dim sum and friendship. A knock at the door interrupted the meeting. Our receptionist entered with an envelope, hand-delivered, no return address. Inside, a handwritten note. Madeline, you were right. I spent so much time trying to scale relationships that I forgot they don't scale, they multiply. One person who cares, teaching another person to care. Creating a network of people who give a damn. That's the only algorithm that matters. I'm starting over. Small firm, different approach. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime. I'd like to learn how to build something that matters. Tyler. I read it twice, then tucked it into my desk drawer. Maybe I'd reach out in a few months. Everyone deserved a second chance to learn that business wasn't about conquering markets or maximizing efficiency. It was about showing up, paying attention, and caring enough to remember that behind every contract was a person with fears, dreams, and a deep need to be seen as more than a revenue stream. The meeting continued. But my mind drifted to a conversation I'd had 16 years ago with Old Man Westbridge. The secret, he'd said, isn't complicated. Treat people like you'd want to be treated. Remember what matters to them. Show up when it counts. The rest is just paperwork. He'd built something real on those principles. Tyler had tried to optimize it into oblivion, and I'd simply picked up the pieces worth saving. Looking around the room at my team, each one committed to the radical idea that business relationships were still relationships. I knew we weren't just building a company. We were proving a point that shouldn't need proving, that in an age of automation and artificial intelligence, the most powerful technology was still giving a damn. Richard Brennan had said it best at last week's client dinner. Anyone can send an email, anyone can run a report, but knowing when to pick up the phone, when to show up in person, when to shut up and listen, that's not a skill you can download. That's who you are. And who I was, it turned out, was exactly who I'd always been. Someone who remembered birthdays and worried about people's kids. Someone who knew that the best business strategy was often just being a decent human being. Someone who understood that loyalty couldn't be manufactured, trust couldn't be automated, and relationships weren't corporate property. They were personal. They were earned. And when push came to shove, they were portable. Tyler had called it unethical. I called it inevitable. Because at the end of the day, people don't leave companies. They follow people. And I'd simply given them someone worth following. I didn't destroy anything. I just took back what I had built. They were the ones who destroyed. I was just the one who carried the bricks home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please comment below and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever experienced something similar in your workplace? I'd love to hear your story.